Today we have a range of Star Wars news. We're going to be talking about the movie side of things, but we're going to start with some speculation of a very important scene from the Ahsoka show. It is no secret that Star Wars often references itself and other franchises too. In recent Disney Plus shows, there are visual references, lines of dialogue that are callbacks to previous Star Wars material, be it the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, the sequels, you name it, and Dave Filoni's Ahsoka was no exception. Tons of callbacks to The Empire Strikes Back, for example. Ahsoka reaching out to Sabine in the Force was very much like Luke and Leia on Bespin. Return of the Jedi with the Noti being fill-ins for the Ewoks. Attack of the Clones when Thrawn and the Grey Mothers arrived on Dathomir. The pan shot of the catacombs was reminiscent of the start of the Clone Wars at the end of episode 2, and those are just 3 of hundreds of examples. Well, in today's video, my dear friends, we're gonna look at the way Ahsoka repeated a trope from The Last Jedi, one of the most controversial Star Wars movies of all time, but unlike in episode 8, they made it work in the Disney Plus show. This is an opinion I've seen a couple of times now, and I thought, you know what, let's start with this, and then we'll move on, and you can share your thoughts in the comments down below. So what is this trope? Well, it all has to do with Hera Syndulla on trial. Hera knew she was doing the right thing, but she butted heads with the New Republic Council, and more specifically, Xiono. So even though the series showed us that what Hera did was against the New Republic, it is written and directed as such that we are always on Hera's side. We still have it in our heads that she is the good guy. The Last Jedi had a very different treatment of Poe. He went down a similar trajectory to Hera, but the writing was not always on his side. The only difference is, Filoni seems to have made it work. So just to summarize, early on in the film, Poe Dameron leads an attack on a First Order dreadnought, but he's ordered by General Leia to return to the Resistance flagship after the base on Dakar has been fully evacuated. As we saw, Poe disobeys and leads his squadron into battle, but this results in heavy Resistance casualties despite the dreadnought's destruction. Poe is subsequently demoted for his actions, and while the film itself frames him as being wrong, his subplot later in the film vindicates his disobedience. Similarly, in the Ahsoka show, Hera Syndulla leads an unsanctioned mission to Cetos. Hera brings a small squadron of X-Wings, but when the Eye of Sion launches into an extragalactic hyperspace jump, 2 X-Wings were destroyed and 2 pilots died. Hera Syndulla's actions and the subsequent casualties led her to be nearly court-martialed, but Senator Leia Organa, through C-3PO, is able to clear her name. While The Last Jedi sides against Poe, Ahsoka stays firmly on Hera's side. And while you have a lot of fans defending Xiono, saying that he was in the right, saying Hera was reckless, the show stays on her side, framing her actions as necessary, and repeatedly proving them to be as such, because Thrawn is alive, and he did return at the end. Hera was right. Poe Dameron, on the other hand, justifies his attack by noting the dreadnought is a fleet killer, so even if he disengaged, the dreadnought would have followed the Raddus via its hyperspace tracking system and destroyed it. What I'm saying is, in the context of the plot, Poe's actions were just as necessary as Hera's, but The Last Jedi's writing depicts him as reckless, clumsy, and lacking of good judgment, even if we as the audience are on his side. He is depicted later as erratic. While the 2 arcs are different, they have very similar parallels. 2 rebels making decisions on their own authority, in the name of the greater good, taking matters into their own hands against their respective authorities, the New Republic and later the Resistance. There is an irony to the fact Leia is sanctioning Poe, in the same way Xiono tried to sanction Hera, when it was Leia herself who bailed her out, years before the events of the sequel trilogy. But it demonstrates the very different kind of writing we had across Star Wars projects. Dave Filoni's a different kind of writer to Rian Johnson, and as I say, we have to account for the very different scenarios of the 2 scenes. The Ahsoka show's decision to frame Hera as the so-called good guy was the best decision they made, but what do you guys think? So just another thing I want to talk about concerning the Ahsoka show is Grand Admiral Thrawn. Now a lot of fans have noticed there is a difference between him and the books, both canon and legends. There are differences between them as well, Star Wars Rebels, and Ahsoka Season 1. There is still so much to uncover in terms of his big plan, in the 2nd season, in Dave's film as well, but there is one line he says in the finale which fans think just pointed out his biggest weakness, or at least this iteration of Thrawn's weakness. Before jumping to hyperspace, before abandoning Sabine and Ahsoka, leaving them on Peridia, Thrawn tells her he correctly predicted her plan because she is just like her master Anakin Skywalker, and he plays on her psychology the entire time as fans were saying, don't listen to him, move out the way, we all saw what was coming next. And he then tells her, one wonders just how similar you might become. He's kind of exploiting Ahsoka's fears, flaunting his victory to some extent, playing on her insecurities about turning to the dark. But it's the smugness, his smile when he says it. This just gave us the biggest indicator of how Thrawn is probably going to eventually lose. His pettiness is his weakness. He's always been confident, he keeps his cards close to the chest, he understands his enemy's mindset. But as Timothy Zahn always said, the way you defeat him is by giving him a situation where there is an unknown factor, one he's not researched, one he's not prepared for, and his arrogance and pettiness could be his undoing. So now that we're going through a Star Wars drought, I want to cover some news from a couple of weeks ago, and it pertains to Gareth Edwards, who currently has an amazing film out, The Creator, and this is kind of a piece of news that pertains to Rogue One, but also that film. Let's get into it. Back in 2022, I made a series of videos about Rogue One. We spoke about deleted scenes, change of creative vision, we spoke about the Vader hallway scene, and how at the time I think it was Freddie Prinze Jr. who said that was Dave Filoni's idea. In either case, there was a lot of Rogue One news in the build up to Andor, and it was a good precursor to the show. It was an exciting time. Well, today, taking a break from talking about Ahsoka, Gareth Edwards has been in the news. Of course, he has a new film called The Creator. I'm a big fan of that film. The ethical dilemmas it brings up, the visuals were fantastic, Industrial Light and Magic worked on it, Hans Zimmer score. It is the best non-Star Wars film that feels so Star Warsy. But Gareth Edwards makes no secret of the fact there are some Star Wars Easter eggs. For example, apparently there is K2SO during one scene, but he also admits he took ideas from Attack of the Clones, Solo: A Star Wars Story, the sequel trilogy, and even though he's not made this explicit, I think The Bad Batch, the idea of Omega in the first 2 episodes of Season 1, and the dilemma she faces being a clone at the time of the fall of the Republic, when clones are not looked upon too fondly. What is personhood? What constitutes an entity who I guess is autonomous, self-governing, can make their own free decisions? And the way this film handles that was superb. It's a great film that I do recommend you go see. However, today, we're not talking about The Creator, we're talking about Rogue One, because Gareth Edwards, of course in all of these interviews for the film, is going to be asked about his Star Wars 2016 endeavour, and he's kind of settled the score, cleared the air, and stated the facts as they are. He says, quote, "There is so much inaccuracy surrounding the narrative and the rumours of the making of Rogue One, reinforcing that they all worked together until the last minute of production. So even though Tony Gilroy came in, and as we know there are scenes in the trailer that never made it into the final cut, Edwards didn't walk away. There have been reports in recent years stating that Lucasfilm sidelined Edwards and brought in Gilroy to write new dialogue and direct additional scenes. While this is no doubt undeniable, Edwards is now stating he was involved in the entire process. Kathleen Kennedy didn't like the first cut, and Gilroy, quote, saved the day so to speak, and he clarifies the final scene of Darth Vader was his idea. It wasn't something thrown in by Dave Filoni or Tony Gilroy. He says, I did all that stuff. I was incredibly lucky. I got to make a Star Wars film. I won the lottery in that sense. The idea of someone as privileged as me in any way implying it was anything other than the amazing experience it was. I don't have any empathy for that person, he says. But Edwards does not deny the reshoots completely changed the film. It was a new plan, he says. You're not just going in and experimenting. We had a new blueprint. So are we ever going to see the original Gareth Edwards cut? Well, both he and Tony Gilroy say no, because it's just not there. But not everyone is convinced. And it's possible we'll never know the truth about Rogue One, but it was a beautiful movie, probably one of Disney Star Wars' best cinematic endeavours, if not the best. And thanks to the creatives on that film, we have Andor. Andor Season 2 is hopefully coming sometime in 2024. It might be pushed back, because production did stop during the strikes, but now that the writer strikes are over, there is still the actors' strike, so we're not sure when production is going to resume. I think it would be so awesome if Gilroy used some Rogue One ideas that were scrapped in the final season of the Disney Plus show. But in regards to an extended cut of Rogue One, this has now been shot down by the director himself and by Tony Gilroy in interviews he did during Andor Season 1. So with that said, my dear friends, share your thoughts on everything we spoke about in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you, always.